I held the envelope with trembling hands. It wasn't thick, but it felt heavier than all the years we'd lived together. "I've made arrangements," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You'll be taken care of." That was it. 50 years, a lifetime together, and all I got was an envelope and silence. You don't reach 73 without learning how to read between the lines. When someone says, "This is what's best," what they often mean is, "This is what's easiest for me." And when someone calls you selfless all your life, it's usually because you've spent that life giving away too much of yourself. I'm not bitter. Not entirely. I just wish I had noticed sooner. My name is Eleanor. Most people call me Ellie. I've lived in the same 2-story cream and green house in Maple Falls for nearly 4 decades. The hydrangeas in the front yard bloom like they know me. The wooden floor in the kitchen still creaks in the same spot near the stove, the one I used to step over while balancing pancakes and coffee for Tom every morning before he retired. Tom. My husband. My partner of 50 years. We were high school sweethearts, the kind of couple people used to admire. We raised one son, Adam, and poured everything into giving him a good life. I don't know exactly when the shift began. Maybe it was subtle. Maybe it was always there, like a hairline crack beneath fresh paint. What I do know is that the moment my daughter-in-law, Morgan, entered the picture, something changed. Slowly, quietly, like a fog rolling in on little cat feet, as the poet says, my presence began to shrink in our family gatherings. At first, I chalked it up to the natural order of things. A young wife wants her own traditions. That's normal, right? I even helped plan their wedding. Paid for it, actually. And not just a little. I dipped into my savings, the ones Tom and I had earmarked for retirement travel. But I was happy to do it. I wanted Morgan to feel like she belonged. I wanted Adam to see that I welcomed her. That's the thing about mothers. Real mothers. We stretch. We bend. Sometimes, we break quietly, so no one hears it but us. The first time Morgan made me feel like a guest in my own family was Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. She forgot to tell me they were hosting dinner at their place, even though I'd always been the one to cook. I found out when I saw pictures on Adam's Facebook. A long table, candles, turkey, everyone laughing. Everyone but me. I confronted Adam. Gently. I remember the conversation like it happened yesterday. "Mom, Morgan just wanted a change this year. You know how she is about aesthetics and Pinterest and all that. Don't take it personally." So I didn't. At least I tried not to. Then came the little things. Canceled visits, lost invitations, Morgan answering my calls with clipped responses or not at all. Tom told me I was imagining things. "She's just busy, Ellie. Don't stir the pot." But I could feel it. I could feel myself being gently, methodically erased. Still, I kept showing up. I brought Morgan flowers when she got her promotion. I crocheted a blanket for their baby, even though they told me not to bother. "We already have everything we need," she said. When Adam turned 40, I hosted a party at our house. Cooked for days. Bought him a watch he'd admired when we passed a store downtown. He barely glanced at it before Morgan pulled him away to show him her surprise. An all-expenses-paid weekend trip to Napa. I stood in the kitchen afterward, surrounded by half-eaten deviled eggs and lukewarm punch, and whispered to myself, "You're still his mother. That has to mean something." But deep down, I was starting to wonder. Tom started to change too. Or maybe he just gave up. Retired early. Spent his days in the sunroom doing crosswords and nodding through conversations. He used to talk to me, laugh with me, hold my hand while we watched old reruns. Now he just muttered, "Don't make a fuss, Elle," every time I tried to share how I was feeling. Then came my birthday. 50 years married. 73 years alive. I wasn't expecting fireworks. But I was expecting acknowledgement. Something. I heard whispers between Tom and Morgan weeks before. She even called me one day, the first time in months, and said, You're not making any plans for your birthday, right? Good. Just show up at 4. So I dressed up. I wore my lavender blouse, the one Tom once said brought out my eyes. I even curled my hair like I used to when we were dating. There was a little flutter in my chest, the same way I'd felt when I was 16 and Tom took me to prom in his daddy's pickup truck. When I arrived at the restaurant, they were already seated, a long table of faces I half recognized. Colleagues of Adam's. Morgan's parents. A few friends from their neighborhood. I looked for familiar faces. Where were my sister and her husband? My lifelong friend Diane? My church ladies? Morgan smiled and waved me over like a distant cousin. Tom stood beside her, expression unreadable. And then, he handed me the envelope. No words. No hug. Just an envelope. White. Plain. My name in his handwriting, the same hand that used to hold mine so tightly during storms. I opened it, my fingers already trembling, and pulled out a single typed sheet. It was from our lawyer. Tom had transferred the title of our home to Adam and Morgan. Effective immediately. As part of estate restructuring, he said. To simplify things. No discussion. No warning. Just done. I felt the floor drop beneath me. Not because of the house. Not even because of the decision. But because of the silence. The finality. The way they all looked at me like I should smile, like I should thank them. I sat down, slowly, the blood draining from my face. Morgan poured me a glass of wine and said, "This way, you don't have to worry about anything anymore. Everything's taken care of." Taken care of. Like I was a chore. A burden. Something to be filed away. I barely touched my food. I barely heard the speeches. My world had gone quiet, like the moment after a bell stops ringing. That night, in our car, Tom didn't even ask how I felt. He turned on the radio to the jazz station and drove in silence, his fingers tapping the wheel like it was just another Tuesday. I stared out the window, my reflection blending with the trees. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Resolve. They thought they knew who I was. A tired old woman, grateful for crumbs, too sentimental to fight back. But they had forgotten one thing. I built that house. I paid the mortgage. I chose every tile, every curtain, every rosebush in that garden. I may have let my love make me small, but I still remembered how to stand tall. And I wasn't done yet. It was nearly midnight by the time we pulled into the driveway. Tom got out without a word, left the car keys on the counter and shuffled into the sunroom, like always, and flipped through the day's paper. Not a glance my way. Not a single question like, "Are you okay?" Not even a "happy birthday." I sat in the car for 10 minutes longer, staring at the faint glow of the porch light reflecting on the windshield. My hands were cold. My heart was colder. When I finally stepped out and walked toward the house, it hit me like a whispered insult. This place, my sanctuary, no longer belonged to me. That night, while Tom snored faintly down the hallway, I stayed awake in the guest bedroom. I didn't want to lie beside a man who could give away our entire life without so much as a conversation. I stared at the ceiling for hours, remembering how we'd once saved for this home dollar by dollar. I worked weekends at the bakery while pregnant with Adam, just so we could afford the down payment. And now it was gone. Just like that. You'll be taken care of. That phrase echoed in my mind like a cruel lullaby. No one asked what I wanted. No one asked how it felt to be reduced to a task on a checklist. The next morning, I opened the hall closet and found my sewing kit, the one tucked behind the spare linens. Inside was my small fireproof box, where I kept things too sacred for the junk drawer. Birth certificates. Insurance papers. The deed to the house. Or what used to be the deed. I stared at the now void document. My name, scratched off in legal ink. Their names, inserted where mine used to be. It felt like a gravestone. But I wasn't going to be buried. Not yet. I didn't say anything to Tom. Not right away. I knew I needed more than a raised voice and a hurt heart. I needed facts. Proof. A plan. So I called Diane. Diane and I had been friends since the 3rd grade. She had a laugh like wind chimes and a brain like a fox in a courtroom. She used to teach accounting and now spent her retirement reading mystery novels and solving her neighbors' problems. She was the one person who always saw through me. She came over that afternoon with a tin of oatmeal cookies and a notepad. I told her everything. At first, she just listened. Nodded. Made small notes. Then she leaned forward, lowered her voice like a conspirator, and said, "Ellie, I love you. But you've spent your whole life giving. And now you're shocked they've taken? Baby takers take. It's what they do." I didn't want to believe it. I still wanted to cling to the idea that maybe Tom was manipulated. Maybe Adam just didn't realize. Maybe Morgan didn't mean harm. But Diane had a way of cutting to the bone. "You don't need to start a war," she said. "You need to start protecting yourself. Quietly. Properly." She put me in touch with someone. A woman named Lorna, retired lawyer, sharp as broken glass and twice as dangerous when wronged. We met at a coffee shop 2 towns over. She looked at the documents I brought, scribbled a few questions on the back of a receipt, and then looked up at me with narrowed eyes. "Do you have any idea how common this is?" she asked. "Older women. Generous mothers. Trusted wives. They sign things out of love and get erased by convenience. Ellie, this isn't care. This is containment." Her words landed like bricks on my chest. I wanted to cry. But I didn't. Not this time. Lorna helped me draft a request for full disclosure. Bank records, retirement transfers, property logs. She said if they were this bold with the house, there were probably more shadows in the corners. She wasn't wrong. 2 weeks later, the truth started unraveling. The vacation fund I thought we still had? Gone. Cashed out quietly over the last 6 months. My name on the retirement account? Replaced with Adam's, for easier access. Tom's will? Amended, with Morgan listed as the primary executor. I wasn't even the secondary. Not even mentioned. I stared at the papers, each line like a betrayal scrawled in cold ink. The man I had bathed when he broke his hip. The man I had spoon-fed through the flu. The father of my child, had slowly written me out of my own life. I confronted him that night. We sat at opposite ends of the dinner table. The roast chicken between us was going cold. The house was too quiet, too still. Even the grandfather clock seemed to tick more cautiously. I slid the papers toward him. "I saw the accounts," I said softly. "I saw what you did." He didn't meet my eyes. Just stared at his plate. "You said it was about simplifying," I continued. "But it looks an awful lot like erasing." Still silence. Then finally he said, "I thought it was for the best. Adam said you'd be safer this way." Safer? Or silent? I asked. He had no answer. That was the night I moved into the guest bedroom for good. I told Tom I needed time, space, and clarity. And I began making quiet moves. I met with another lawyer, this time downtown, far from anyone who might know our family. I had new documents drawn. I drafted a letter revoking all informal agreements. I created a private account, moved what little I had left into it, and started documenting every interaction with Tom and Morgan. I even had the locks on my personal safe changed. Diane was my witness for everything. I also began collecting memories, photos, journals, receipts, cards, anything that reminded me of who I had been before I started shrinking. And through all of it, I did not tell Adam. Not yet. He had chosen where he stood. Let him stand in it. One day, Morgan came by to pick up a box of old Christmas decorations. She walked through my house like she owned it, because technically she did. She smiled at me over her shoulder and said, "Hope you're getting settled. This transition is hard, I know. But it's really best you rest now. You've earned that much at least." I smiled too. A cold, polite smile. The kind that says, you should be careful what you assume about a woman who's been quiet too long. Because she had no idea. I had already started writing the final chapter. And in my chapter, the ending was mine. The morning I received the final set of financial statements, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window with the documents in my lap like a storybook. Outside, the hydrangeas were beginning to bloom again. Wide, beautiful, full of a life that didn't ask for permission. There were 6 statements in total. 6 pages of black and white truths. Silent withdrawals from the joint retirement account, small monthly transfers to a separate trust account with Adam's name on it, and a closed CD account I didn't even know had existed. When I added up the totals, my stomach twisted. They had moved more than $200,000 out of accounts I had helped build over a lifetime. Quietly. Strategically. Without discussion or consent. There was a name for that. Financial betrayal. It was the kind of wound that didn't bleed, but cut deep all the same. Tom still didn't speak much to me. Since the night I confronted him, he acted like I was invisible, like his silence would preserve his innocence. But silence is a language, and I spoke it fluently now. I heard every word he didn't say. Adam hadn't called since the birthday dinner. Morgan texted once, something shallow about a spa day she was planning for the both of us. I didn't reply. I wasn't playing nice anymore. Instead, I was preparing. Diane helped me schedule an appointment with a financial investigator named Rowan. Young, sharp, wore round tortoiseshell glasses and had a quiet intensity that reminded me of a birdwatcher studying predators. Rowan went over everything. The changes in accounts, the legal signature trails, even the real estate filings. His conclusion was swift. They moved your assets in phases. It's deliberate. Calculated. They're trying to consolidate control over everything before you catch on. Good news is, you caught on in time. He handed me a printout. Bad news? You've got a battle ahead. I nodded. Come. Focused. Because by now, I wasn't hurt. I was clear. I hired Rowan. I gave my new attorney, Ms. Alvarez, power of attorney for financial actions related to asset recovery. And then, I got to work on the one thing Morgan and Tom hadn't anticipated. My voice. I reached out to every person who mattered to me. Church friends, my sister Margaret, old neighbors, the ones who'd been slowly cut off from me over the years. I asked questions. I apologized for the distance, even when I wasn't the one who created it. I reconnected, not just to people but to myself. And I told the truth. Not to shame Tom or destroy Adam, but to reclaim the narrative. Because silence, too, had been a kind of imprisonment. I was done whispering. 3 weeks later, Tom's health started to falter. Nothing dramatic, just a persistent cough, a forgetfulness that seemed heavier than old age. I took him to the doctor. The diagnosis was early-stage vascular dementia. A slow unraveling. One we could have faced together, maybe, if he'd trusted me. Instead, when I brought him home, he refused to speak to me. Sat on the porch for hours, staring into the distance like the world had betrayed him. But I felt nothing. No vindication. No revenge. Only clarity. He had chosen his path. And now I was choosing mine. Then came the night Adam finally called. It was a Thursday. I was baking banana bread, humming softly to myself with the kitchen windows open, when the phone rang. Mom. His voice was hesitant. Hey, it's been a while. I didn't say anything. Listen, he continued. Morgan said you've been doing some legal stuff. Something about the accounts? About the house? Still I said nothing. I let him fill the silence. I thought we agreed. Dad said it was just estate planning. You know, for everyone's benefit. Less confusion later. I finally answered. Is that what he told you? That I agreed? Well, yeah. Wasn't that the plan? Adam, I said quietly, when was the last time you asked me what I wanted? There was a pause on the line. A long, empty pause. Mom, don't make this a drama. I almost laughed. You took my name off my house, drained my accounts, rewrote my husband's will, and handed me an envelope on my birthday, Adam. This isn't my drama. It's my reality. He didn't know what to say. So I finished for him. Tell Morgan I'll see her in court. And I hung up. The next week, I filed a formal petition to reverse the title transfer on the grounds of undue influence and lack of consent. Rowan submitted a full financial abuse report to our county's Elder Protection Division. Ms. Alvarez moved swiftly, freezing the accounts that had been quietly emptied and initiating proceedings for a formal investigation. Diane stood by me every step of the way. We even went shopping together. Not for groceries or yarn, but for power suits. Real ones. Blazer. Slacks. Shoes that made a sound when you walked into a room. Time to stop dressing like a shadow, she said, pinning a brooch to my lapel. You're a storm now. Morgan didn't take it well. She showed up at my doorstep 2 days after the filing. Tight-lipped, trembling with what I think was a mix of panic and entitlement. I don't know what you think you're doing, she hissed. I stood calmly in the doorway. No fear. No apology. I'm protecting myself. This is going to tear the family apart, she said, crossing her arms. I nodded. It already is. I'm just making the damage visible. She tried to step inside. I didn't move. This is my house, Morgan. You'll need permission to enter now. Her mouth twitched. Her eyes darted behind me, searching for Tom. He's resting, I said. And you'll be hearing from my lawyer. Then I closed the door. Softly. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Not because I had won. I hadn't. Not yet. But because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be likable. Or quiet. Or grateful for breadcrumbs. I was a woman who had been betrayed, and stood up anyway. I had feared becoming alone. What I hadn't realized was the freedom in being unattached. Unmanipulated. Unowned. The legal proceedings were just beginning. There would be documents, hearings, maybe even press coverage in the local paper. But none of it scared me. Because no matter what came next, I had already taken back the most important thing they tried to take. Myself. The first court date came on a rainy morning in April. I stood outside the courthouse with Diane beside me, both of us holding umbrellas and quiet resolve. I wore the navy pantsuit we'd chosen together. Pressed and clean, with a pearl pin from my mother on the collar. It wasn't about dressing for them. It was about showing up for me. Morgan and Adam were already there when we arrived. He looked thinner, more tired. Morgan, on the other hand, looked like she was ready for war. Tight bun, red lipstick, legal folder clutched like a weapon. She avoided my eyes. Adam didn't. For a second, he looked like my boy again, the one I used to cradle during storms, the one who made me macaroni necklaces and called me his best girl. But I didn't smile. Not anymore. Inside the courtroom, Ms. Alvarez presented our case with sharp precision. Timeline of financial transfers, evidence of my exclusion, my documented lack of informed consent, and the suspicious rewrites of Tom's will. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Truth has a gravity of its own. Morgan's attorney tried to paint me as forgetful. Emotional. An elderly woman who had confused conversations or forgotten intentions. But they underestimated me. When the judge asked if I wanted to speak, I stood slowly and walked to the stand. My voice didn't shake. My memory didn't fail. I may be 73, I said, but I've built a life brick by brick. I raised a son. I cared for a husband through surgeries, sickness, storms. I know what I've signed. And I know what I didn't. I wasn't confused. I was excluded. The courtroom was silent. Even Morgan blinked. Even Adam looked away. This isn't just about a house or money. This is about being erased. I gave them everything. They handed me an envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The judge didn't rule that day. These things take time. But Rowan told me as we left, "You've already shifted the tide. That testimony. They won't forget it." And I didn't walk out of that courtroom like a victim. I walked out like a storm in pearls. The days that followed were filled with depositions, follow-up meetings, signatures. I stayed busy, focused. But at night, when the house was quiet, I would sometimes walk the hallway barefoot, trailing my fingers along the walls, remembering all the versions of myself that had lived here. The young bride who painted the nursery yellow. The exhausted mother who rocked Adam to sleep through fevers. The lonely wife who sat in silence while her husband signed her out of her own life. And now, the woman they forgot to fear. One afternoon, as I folded laundry, Tom came into the room. He hadn't said much to me since the dementia diagnosis. He was slipping more each day, sometimes calling me by his sister's name, sometimes mistaking the year. But that day he was lucid. "Ellie," he said, standing awkwardly near the door, "did I do this to you?" I didn't answer right away. I folded another towel. "I don't remember signing everything," he said, his voice small. "But I must have. You wouldn't lie." I set the towel down. "You didn't just sign it, Tom. You let them convince you that I was disposable." His shoulders slumped. "I thought I was protecting you," he murmured. "No," I said softly. "You were protecting them from having to deal with me." He sat down on the edge of the bed, hands shaking. And I, the woman who had wiped his mouth through surgeries, who had pressed cold cloths to his fevered brow, I didn't sit beside him. I stood tall. "I loved you," I said, "even when you stopped seeing me. But I won't let that love be the reason I'm erased." He looked up at me, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry," he said. And I believed him. But it didn't change what came next. A month later, the judge ruled in our favor. The house title was reversed. The account transfers were frozen pending investigation. My power of attorney was restored. The ruling was firm. This court finds substantial evidence of financial manipulation and undue influence. The petitioner, Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, retains her legal ownership and standing. My name was mine again. The day after the ruling, I received a text from Adam. "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Instead, I wrote him a letter, with my own hand, the same way I used to write him notes in his lunchbox. It read, "Dear Adam, being your mother was the greatest gift of my life. And also in many ways the deepest sorrow. I raised you to be strong, not cruel. I raised you to protect, not profit. You chose to listen to someone who believed my silence meant permission. You chose convenience over conversation. And while I will always love the boy you were, I can no longer bend for the man you've become. Consider this my goodbye, not to you, but to the version of me who stayed small to make others comfortable." "Mom," I folded it carefully. No tears on the paper. I mailed it that afternoon. And then, I did something I hadn't done in years. I packed a suitcase. Just one. And I drove. No destination in mind. Just the open road, soft music, and the steady beat of my own heartbeat in my ears. I stopped in towns I'd only ever read about. I walked into bookstores and bought poetry. I stayed in little inns and ate pie with strangers. I saw myself again. Not Tom's wife. Not Adam's mom. Just Ellie. There's a silence that only comes after a storm. It's not empty, not quite. It's the hush of something rebuilt. The quiet after the wind has stopped howling, when the trees stand a little taller, and you realize, you survived it. That's the silence I live in now. It's been nearly 9 months since the ruling. The dust has settled. The court proceedings are closed. The house, my house, is mine again, not just on paper, but in spirit. I walk through the halls and no longer feel like a guest in my own life. Tom has declined faster than I expected. Some days, he recognizes me. Some days, he thinks I'm his cousin June or a kind nurse from church. I care for him with compassion, but no longer from obligation. I do it because I choose to. That is my boundary now. I choose what I give. Adam hasn't visited. He sent a birthday card last month. Unsigned, typed, generic. No return address. Just a white envelope with my name and a message that read, "Wishing you peace." Peace. I already found it. It's in my morning tea. In the way the light hits the kitchen counter just right. In the scent of rosemary from the garden. In Diane's laugh during our weekly lunch dates. In the feel of a journal filling up with poems and memories. I didn't rebuild a house. I rebuilt a life. And in that rebuilding, I discovered something that no betrayal could take. My voice. One afternoon, I was sitting at the local library, flipping through an old copy of The Gift by Hafiz, when a woman sat next to me. She looked tired. Worn at the edges like a bookmark left out in the rain. She recognized me from church and leaned in softly. "I heard what happened," she said, eyes scanning the book in my lap. "Your son. Your husband. All of it." I nodded. "I think it's happening to me," she whispered. "I gave my daughter my house. Now she won't let me host Christmas. Says I'll get confused." Her eyes brimmed with the same quiet pain I once carried. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of Ms. Alvarez's card. I'd started carrying extras, just in case. And I handed it to her. "You're not confused," I said. "You're being erased. But you don't have to let them." She looked at the card. Then at me. "What if I'm too late?" I smiled. I thought that too. Turns out, it's never too late to remember who you are. She cried. Right there in the library. And I sat with her, steady and strong, the way Diane once sat with me. I started volunteering at the senior center after that. Just a few hours a week. Helping with paperwork, sharing resources, talking about boundaries, estate protection, emotional manipulation. You'd be amazed how many women quietly say, "Me too," when you tell them your story. There's a quiet army of forgotten women out there. And now I walk among them, not as a victim, but as a torchbearer. Last week, I hosted Sunday lunch again. Real Sunday lunch. Roasted vegetables, fresh bread, lemon cake from scratch. Diane was there, and Margaret, and a few of the new women I'd met at the center. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. The house felt full again, but not with guilt or tension. With joy. After lunch, I walked through the garden alone. The hydrangeas were in bloom, full and radiant. The wind was soft, brushing against my cheek like a memory. And I whispered into the breeze like a prayer, "Thank you for breaking me open, so I could become whole." I don't know what the future holds. None of us do. But I know this. I will never again apologize for taking up space in my own life. I will never again accept silence as protection. And I will never again hand over the keys to my peace in the name of family. Family is love, yes. But it is also respect. And I have earned every ounce of both. I didn't just survive betrayal. I outgrew it. And in doing so, I became the one thing they never expected. Free.